What's going on, guys? It's Hi, and in this video I'm going to show you how to balance and set up the Sirui Swift P1. In order to balance a gimbal, we first have to understand what it is we have to adjust in order to accomplish the task. With the Sirui Swift P1, we have 5 different points of adjustments. The first 2 points of adjustments are going to be on the camera carriage itself. Our first point of adjustment is the quick release plate itself. This attaches to your camera and ultimately allows you to attach your camera to the gimbal. As you can see, this plate has 3 different slots, and this just allows you to incrementally move your camera forwards and backwards on the plate to help achieve balancing. These slots also allow you to move the camera from side to side just a little bit in case it is actually needed for balancing. Our next point of adjustment is going to be the position of the quick release plate on the camera bridge. As you can see, the plate can move forward and backwards, and this will affect balancing. The quick release plate itself is held in place by this silver screw. Once you unlock it, it allows the plate to move forwards and backwards, lock it down, and the plate stays in place. To remove the quick release plate, just unlock this silver screw. The plate will be able to move freely forwards and backwards, but it will not actually come out of this camera bridge. To release it, there is a quick release button right here. All you have to do is press it, and the plate can be easily extracted. Moving on, our next point of adjustment is the pan motor as dictated by this front lock right here. Once this is loosened, you can move this arm up and down. Next is the roll motor as dictated by this screw. Once you loosen it, it allows you to adjust the arm from left to right. Next is the pan motor as dictated by this last screw. Once you unlock it, this panning arm can move forwards and backwards. Now that we've established everything that we need to adjust in order to achieve proper balancing, we can move on to the actual tutorial. For this video, I'll be demonstrating the balancing process with my cell phone, the iPhone XS Max, and the included cell phone holder. In my opinion, a modern smartphone is going to be the hardest device to balance because it is so thin and narrow, and it has the smallest point of balance. So if you are able to balance a cell phone, you can pretty much balance any other device. Even though I'm doing this demonstration with a cell phone, everything that I'm going to show you is going to be applicable to every other device that works with this gimbal. With that said, let's get started with the balancing process. The first thing that we have to do is mount our camera rig onto the quick release plate. Of course, because I'm balancing a cell phone, I have to attach a cell phone holder to the quick release plate before I can actually mount the cell phone. And here is what that actually looks like. As mentioned earlier, this quick release plate does have 3 different slots for you to choose from, and it also allows you to move your camera from side to side. If you're unsure of which slot and in what position, I would suggest to just go dead center middle slot and right in the middle of it. This will give you the most baseline setting, and if later you find out that this doesn't work for balancing, you can always adjust it, but this should be your starting point for experimentation. Next, we are going to mount our quick release plate and camera system back into the camera carriage, and just lock it down for now so that it doesn't move around and slide everywhere. Now this is where I'm going to add on to what I previously said about where you should mount your camera on the quick release plate. In my opinion, the easiest way to get a camera balanced is if you have the camera as close as you can to this pan motor. In order to do that, you may have to loosen up the screw and move the plate from side to side to get the camera as close as it can to this pan motor. That's just a matter of experimentation, but it is something that I would highly suggest you do because, like I said, it will make balancing a lot easier. When you're first starting out, the gimbal may look something like this, just completely off balance and hanging off to one side. Well, the ultimate goal of balancing a gimbal is to get it to a place like this, where when even the gimbal is off, you can pretty much move the gimbal and this carriage to any position and it'll stay in place and not just bounce around everywhere. This gimbal is currently balanced, but I'm going to throw it out of whack and make it completely unbalanced to show you guys how we can get here. And I think that's pretty good. When balancing a gimbal, the first thing that I like to adjust is actually the roll motor, because I feel that once the roll motor is balanced, the whole camera carriage isn't bouncing around everywhere and everything is a lot more manageable. So let's address this first. With the roll motor, the goal is to get it parallel with the ground. So this arm right here, just make it as flat as possible. To do this, we just loosen up the screw and move this arm from left to right. When balancing, just think of things as a scale. If it's too heavy on one side, the scale is going to tip that way. If it's too heavy the other side, it'll tip that way. Balancing a gimbal is pretty much based on the same concepts. All we have to do is move this arm left to right until we find the position where it's equally weighed on either side. So let's just see what happens when we push it all the way to the extremes. Let's push it all the way to the right, and the gimbal slants to the right. Push it all the way to the left, it slants to the left. Now let's try to find its balancing point, which is somewhere about there. Now, standing back here with my current point of view, everything is looking pretty balanced. I don't see the gimbal leaning towards one way or the other. I just want to point out that although getting proper balance is a very important aspect of using a gimbal in general, it is still a very manual and guess and check process. It is very difficult to get it exactly perfectly balanced. So in my opinion, just get it as close as you can and don't worry too much about achieving perfection. With that said, once we get the roll motor to a place that we're happy with, just lock it down and we can move on to the next step. Now we are going to be working on the pan motor, which tilts the camera carriage up and down. For this, we are going to be using this tightening screw and this arm. In my opinion, the easiest way to balance this axis is to have your camera rig and your camera lens pointing straight up towards the sky. The goal here is to be able to let go of this camera carriage and the camera lens still point straight up. So you don't want to falling down like this or falling backwards, just pointing straight up. Like the roll motor, all we're going to do is move this arm up and down till we find that proper balancing point. If we move this arm too far up, the camera rig will be back heavy and fall backwards. If we move it too far down, it'll be front heavy. So let's just make micro adjustments till we find a spot where the camera lens is pointing straight upwards, not falling too far forwards or back, something like that. Once we get it here, we're done with the tilt motor and just lock it down. Now, balancing the tilt motor is actually a longer process because it requires you to balance multiple things. First was, of course, this vertical arm, which we have already adjusted. Now we have to balance the camera's front to back position. This time we have to balance things so that the camera doesn't fall forwards or backwards. We just want it pointing straight ahead. To do this, just loosen up this silver screw again, which holds the quick release plate in place. And to balance this, all we have to do is move the plate back and forth, and again, just get the camera to point straight ahead. If the plate is too far forwards, the camera falls forward. If the plate is too far backwards, it falls backwards. Again, it's all about micro adjustments, a little bit forwards, a little bit backwards, until we can find the point where the camera is properly facing forwards, like that, then just lock it down. At this point, there's only one thing left to adjust, and it is the pan motor. Balancing the pan motor is going to take the most effort because in order to do this, you actually have to have this handle parallel to the ground, and the goal here is to have this arm also parallel to the ground. For this demonstration, I'm just going to be holding the handle up in the air like this, but this can be quite a bit tiring, so you might want to figure out another way to do this. One thing that you can do is to just find a table or somewhere flat that you can place this handle on, hang the camera carriage over the edge, and then you can balance it without really any effort. Now again, the goal here is to have this pan arm parallel to the ground, and the process is just like everything else. Just move the arm backwards and forwards until you find that proper balancing position. If you move it too far back, the arm will fall down. Too far forward, it'll fall up. So just go somewhere in between. And for me, it's looking like it's going to be right there, so I'm just going to lock it down. And we're done. Now all we have to do is check our work and to see if we've actually achieved proper balance. And to do this, all you have to do is move the camera carriage in various positions, and if it stays in that spot, you know that you are properly balanced, and if it moves around too much, something's wrong. Just check where it's moving and go back and readjust. But as far as this gimbal is properly balanced, and we are good to go. And that was my personal process for balancing the Sirui Swift P1. If you made it this far in the video, hopefully that means that you were also successful in balancing your gimbal. If you're new to balancing these electronic gimbals, I know it can be difficult at first, but it's just one of those things that you have to practice, and once you get used to it, the process goes by pretty quickly. The good news is pretty much all modern electronic 3-axis gimbals are designed the same way, and this means that the balancing process is going to be pretty much the same across the board. This just means that once you get the process down, you can pretty much balance any other gimbal on the market. So if you're still struggling with the balancing process, just keep at it. You'll eventually get it. Rewatch this video a few times and just go over the parts that is messing you up. I hope this video has helped you out. If it did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it around, comment down below if you have any questions on this process. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more content. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.